Hey guys, welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to introduce you to SPSS. I'm going to talk about the very basics, which is understanding the SPSS interface. I'll introduce you as a beginner to how to navigate SPSS and how to carry out basic data analysis. So without wasting time, let's get right into the video. The first thing you need to do is open SPSS. As you can see, SPSS is already on my screen, but for the sake of explaining, all you just have to do is search for IBM SPSS. I'm using IBM SPSS Statistics 25, but it works, similarly with other version. Then you are going to see this page. Now, if you look at this is just a welcome page, and this is the actual page that we want to be looking at. So if you see something like this, you can cancel it and then we'll go right into our SPSS software. So now this is the SPSS interface. As you can see, you have the menu bar, or what you can call the toolbar, similar to what you see on Excel and some other software. Then you have the rows and the column, like in form of a spreadsheet. Here you have, on the header you have var, which stands for variable, and it means that your variables will be on each column. So each column represents a single variable. And if you don't understand what variable is, a variable is an entity that can hold values. So we have data, which is just raw facts, and then we have variable, which houses multiple or different data or values. So you're going to understand this concept as we move along, but understand that each column represents or houses several variables. The next thing is there's a variable view. Apart from the data view, there's a variable view, so you can toggle between the two and notice the difference. On the variable view, we have what columns such as the name, type, weight, decimals, label, etc. So going back to our variable view, I want you to play around with the SPSS, because that's the best way for you to understand it. So we're going to start by inputting random data. We're going to start by inputting random data. You can click on 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. So to enter data in SPSS, you can click on any cell and you can start writing. You can start typing. You can start typing. So we have different data, and one thing you notice is moment we start input data, the VAR changed to var1, var2, var3, var4, which actually represents what variable 1, variable 2, variable 3, variable 4. Another thing that you can notice is when you go to the variable view from here, you notice that all of those variables are represented as row on the variable view, which means all of the variable names are what we have here. So the data view access the data set or the data that you have, and then the variable view houses your variables in your data view, and it also contains some other properties. So we're going to focus on explaining what these properties are and before going back to the data view. So basically you've imputed this data, but you need to have certain information for your user or for you to be able to understand this data properly. Like these are just random data, but we need to make sense of it. What does 10 mean? What does 12 mean? What does all of this data represent. So we could say variable 1 actually represents um, academic um, scores for students. So we can say variable 1 represents the score for a student. Variable 2 represents scores again for another subject. So variable 1 represents score for a particular subject, variable 2 represents score for another subject, while variable 4 also represents score for another subject. Meanwhile, variable 3 represents the class where those students belong. So now we've explained all of this, but it is not virtual. Put it put this information into SPSS, and then the users and you as a person working on SPSS can see all of these things in your in the interface. So the first thing is what to say variable 1 represent subject 1, so we can call it subject 1 since we don't have a particular name for the subject. Then we have subject 2, then we have this as class, then we have this as subject 3. So having renamed this, you notice what all of this has changed. So another thing that I want you to take away from this video is that there's ways in which you can write your variable name. So there are some certain constraints or limitation. I'll start from this. Imagine we want to write subject with a space like this. So when I click on it, it brings what variable name contains an illegal character. That means SPSS will not allow you to put in certain characters when you are writing your variable name, like space, hash, and some other ones. So same thing. You also cannot start the variable name with a number. It gives you an error. Also you can't have similar or duplicate variable name. Let's say we want to put subject 2, even though we have subject 2 already. It also throws an error, and the error message is the variable name duplicates an existing variable name. So notice this, if you must have like two different values or two different strings, for example, we want to have subject 1, and in this case we don't want to write them together this way. It doesn't look okay. So you can use underscore. So you are free to use underscore, it's going to work. And then you can also use what underscore here and underscore here. So there are other things that you need to define in your um, variable view. So I will come to that in a minute. So but let's go back to our data view. Now we see that there is a meaning to each of our values. So makes sense. The next thing is you notice that we have subject 1, subject 2, subject 3, then we have class and subject. So it would be nice to have class at the very beginning while we have subject 1, 2, 3. So to just you can move your column around by holding this column and then moving it. So right now we have class, subject 1, subject 2, subject 3. So the next thing is going back to the variable view. I want to explain certain things that are very important when it comes to defining your variable. The first thing is all of these are values. So when we come here under measure, we have different options. First thing is scale, ordinal, and nominal. So there are different measure in which you can define your variable. So quickly, scale represents numbers. It represents a value that is continuous, like scores. academic performance, um, money is also quantifiable. You name it, any value that is continuous, it could go from 0 to 1 million to 1 trillion. Those are what you represent scale with. And even if the maximum value is 100, it's still scale. So far it's a continuous data. So all of these subjects are scale measure. And the last one, which is class, we know that class could be in it could be senior secondary school 1, senior secondary school 2, secondary school 3. So in this case, it could be SS1, SS2, SS3. And that means it is not just a number, but in the data view, we are representing class as number. So this says a lot about SPSS. Even though we can represent class as as alphabets, it is always preferable to represent your data as number so that you can carry out an analysis on it, so that you can do a frequency count on it, so that you can do uh, uh, so that you can do several descriptive analysis on your data. Because once you put in as an alphabet, there's no way the data can interact with other columns. As we move along, you understand what I mean. But for now, you need to represent any data or any alphabet data that you have, or alphanumeric data that you have. You need to code it into number, and that's where data coding comes in. I will explain that in later videos. So you need to understand that 1 represent SS1, 2 represent SS2, and 3 represent SS3 in this case. So however, this class, since we know is an alphanumeric and it is not just a number, we can't represent it as scale because it's not a continuous value. A number actually represents uh, a particular alphabet or a category, which is what the class. So we need to make this number nominal. Now we have an option to choose either nominal or ordinal, but for this case we are going to be using nominal because nominal measure actually represents any variable that doesn't have some sort of hierarchy. Even though class probably has an hierarchy, yeah, it mostly does. So we can represent class as ordinal since it has some level of hierarchy. What I mean by level of hierarchy is that when a variable such as gender is being represented in SPSS, you will call gender a nominal variable. And I think class also falls under nominal variable. However, you can switch it around. It doesn't mostly have any effect on your results. But just know any category that doesn't have a particular level of hierarchy, where one is not greater in weight than the other, are nominal data. While categories that have a level of hierarchy, such as rank, age category can also be ordinal. Um, yeah, those kind of category, those kind of variable can be represented as ordinal. You will also see examples of ordinal data or ordinal measure in a later time. So with that being said, have successfully settled our measures, and we can also play around with the decimals. As you can see, if I make this 0 decimal place, the value automatically changes, and then we don't have any decimal at all here. So let's make every of the value 0 decimal place. So we are making every of the value 0 decimal place. There are other There are other functions here like label values, which you would get to understand when we get to data coding. But for label simply means you labeling your variable name. You can, for example, here we have some level of restriction when naming the variable here, but you have freedom to write out the full meaning of your variable in the label section. For example, I can say class student. See, I'm able to write whatever I want here. So I can say here subject one and use this as math. Then I can call this subject 2 as English. I can call this subject 3 as current. So in label, you can write whatever name you want to give your variable. You have a freedom to use any symbol, any symbol, any signs, and in turn this will appear in the result of your analysis. So the last thing on this video would be the toolbar. So I'm going to take you around the menu bar from file, which means you can save your work file here. You can also import data. I will talk about that in a later time. You can open a new data view, and you can open a new data view or open an existing data view. So for this case, let's save our worksheet. You click on save, and then I can put it here and call it SPSS basics. Then after renaming, you click save. Your file has been saved. The most important functions or features that you're going to be interacting with in the course of this tutorial is data transform, very important. Analyze, about 80% of your activities will be on this, and then graphs. So these four are like the most important feature that we're going to be interacting with. So they also have some of these symbol. When you hover around it, you see the name. So yeah, that's it. That's the introduction to um, SPSS interface. In the next video, we'll take you through some basic data coding and data analysis technique. So yeah, bye and see you in the next video.